Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Bennington Firehouse. I always have to check the dates. These months go so fast. October 23rd, and this is the meeting of the Bennington Select Board. I think I'd like to introduce myself as Tom Jacobs, and we'll go down and start here with Jeannie.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Jenkins.
Good evening, I'm Donald Campbell.
I'm Jim Carroll.
Carson Thurber.
Jean Connor.
Stuart Hurd. And I understand that Chad will not be with us. Chad, he's feeling under the weather, but he's with us in thought and prayers, and hope he recovers quickly so he can go for another victory this Friday. If we could all stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Donald, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You've received the packet, which contains the minutes from the October 9th meeting, as well as the warrants, which have been circulated and reviewed. And I have signed them in anticipation of the consent agenda being adopted, but I would like a motion for that purpose.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the consent agenda as circulated?
I just have a correction. On page 3, other business, I don't think I said some acreage. Mrs. Connor clarified a message from the BCIC when they said they took possession. I think what I said was, does that mean they own it? I just was clarifying what took possession meant.
Yeah,
So, anyway.
didn't take custody, they took title.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
took title. Maybe the
So-
record could reflect that. Is that acceptable to the rest of the board? For that? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the consent agenda signify by aye.
Aye.
And that's 6 in favor and no opposition to that. We have opportunity for the citizens to comment, and sign-up sheet has been received. Have William Stewart, and the topic is the Bradford status. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Select Board. I'll make this quick. Just come to ask for a few questions. Now, on September 5th and September 19th, on a Tuesday, I noticed there's a group of people over there to the water aquifer. And as on Tuesday, October 10th, Dan was there with a group of people from the Select, or if I guess people from the Select Board or somebody that I couldn't see because I wasn't there. I just seen it on the camera. But I see a state vehicle was there also. So I was kind of wondering what the questions are about the aquifers. Is there anything moving forward? Is there anything being done about the traffic of the tractor trailers?
Okay. I think I'll defer to the town manager. I wasn't involved in any meeting there, but maybe Stuart can.
I don't know what the state, there are no questions about the aquifer, let's make that clear. And we continue to await engineering estimates on a relocated site that we have identified. It looks fairly positive, but of course our engineers are being pushed and pulled with PFOA and a whole host of other problems, but we're still hoping to get those estimates in fairly soon.
Okay, and secondly, I have another question. Quite a few years ago, the town, I guess, spent $120 million on the bypass to make sure that tractor-trailer traffic was stopped in the middle of town. Now, I've talked to quite a few people from V-Trans and other parts of the state that I had to try to get in touch with about it, and they said that the town can enact a law to stop the tractor-trailers from coming through the downtown, through the village of downtown, which every single one of these tractor-trailers comes from, because I work in Albany, I come back from Albany, and I follow them all the way from Albany, Route 22, and they take a right on 9 and come all the way from the west end of town, all the way through the old Bennington, all the way to the east end of town with these tractor-trailers and the water weight and the size of their trucks. Now, the bypass is probably a stone's throw from the aquifer. So my question is why aren't we making these trucks use the bypass, which is on the east end of where the aquifer is, instead of driving it all the way through the downtown, area of town? And when they leave out of town, they got a lot of weight on them. They're pushing 80,000 pounds, and we've had a few trucks in there. I noticed I got pictures of them and video of them, and the truck is over 8,000 gallons of water. And I don't know, and it's a Vermont truck, and the truck is completely over the 80,000 pound weight limit. The tractor itself is that weight with the water on it. So my question is why did we spend $120 million to tax the town and not use the bypass even a little bit. I watch every one of them goes right through downtown, and they come through downtown.
So your constructive suggestion is for the vehicles to take 279 and not go through town?
Right, from the
Just wanted
back
to
door
make
of the east end. That's the aquifers at the far end of the town on the east end, and
it's a
that
great
bypass is
observation.
right there. And these trucks, the traffic, they come in and they park on Main Street now, from Pepper Mills all the way down to Stewart's, and they park and block that lane of traffic. You come down from the, if you come from the east to go down west, you gotta watch vehicles go around the yellow line to get around the trucks. My question is, why are they not using the bypass and the pull-off area to stage and wait for the trucks? There's a huge pull-off area. You probably put 5, 6 tractor trailers in there all at one time. So that's all my question is when I talked to V-Trans, they said it would have to be enacted by the town.
I can tell you that we're not going to change the downtown rules for semis or otherwise. Now, as far as the contract with the water companies, that may be something we can look into to get them to use the bypass and rather than use the downtown area.
Well,
but I don't think we can change the rules of the downtown for semis or otherwise, because a lot of those trucks are coming in to service the downtown.
Well, that's for the trucks that service the downtown. Yeah. These trucks are coming in and leaving. They're taking, they're not giving anything to the town.
Yeah, but you want everything, so they all don't.
No, I want the congestion of the tractor-trailer traffic on Main Street to stop, when they could use the bypass and quit coming through downtown. And my understanding was it was built specifically for stopping the traffic coming from west, going to east, coming to east, going to west through the downtown.
I don't think I disagree with you. I think that
No,
was probably.
yeah, that's a good.
That was the original
but
intent.
That was the intent. That's what I've been told by the elders of this town and the people I talked to.
Why don't we?
But I just want to make a point. You know, a lot of those tractor-trailer trucks are making local deliveries.
That's what I don't disagree that.
He's just talking
But
about the
these
water.
guys are coming and going from all the way from west, and they drive right straight through town, all the way through town to the far end on Main Street, when the back aquifer is this far from the bypass. I mean, I've seen them use it before, and I don't understand why all of a sudden now they just want to drive it through Main Street. You know, I've seen them staging on the top of the hill, and I've been behind them as they're climbing the hill to go over. Right. So all of a sudden now they just don't want to use it no more, and I've noticed it because I come and go to Albany all the time.
Let's look into that, Bill. I mean, I don't want to have a
No, I just
protection.
want to, I've got one question for you,
Let's
man.
keep
I
it
insist
quick, okay?
on this.
Because this is not a
Bill,
negotiation.
if we took those trucks out of those water trucks out of the downtown, we'd get no money for the water. So that would be $80,000.
I don't understand. How do you explain that?
Wait a second. $80,000 that we're getting from the town. If those trucks
Okay,
were
I
not
don't-
allowed to come through town
We're-
anymore,
No,
we'd
no.
get nothing.
The contract's the contract.
You're missing it.
Yeah.
You're missing it. Totally, Jim.
I understand
The
what you're saying.
bypass and the aquifer are this far apart. Why are they traveling through the town?
Let me just capsulize what you just said. Why don't we look at making an arrangement with the water company to have their trucks come on 279 and not down through the town? Simple
I
question.
believe that'd be a great answer. That's a fabulous answer because they should be.
Okay. Thank you.
You'd
We'll
think
look
it'd
at,
be quicker, you know?
yeah, but let's.
I just want to make a quick clarification. The town didn't spend $120 million to build the bypass.
That was federal money.
Well, yeah,
Right, okay.
some of it was
I just
federal.
wanted to make sure that
Yep.
the viewers
Like,
don't
not all
think
of
that
it,
we
but some of
paid
it.
for the bypass, because we did not. Well, we did, but not directly. In our taxes, we probably did, as well as probably tens of thousands of other people.
Well, if you look at it through the statewide, that's quite a bit of money to build a bypass.
You said the town paid for it,
Right.
and we did not.
Well, I reiterate that the town didn't pay for all of it. They paid for a good portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the federal
Why don't we
government paid for
just,
the rest.
we got the question, let us resolve it one way or the other. We might not have the answer you want, but we might have an answer, and we'll deal with that accordingly. Okay? We appreciate that. Thanks,
Okay.
Bill.
Have a good evening.
Dave Crawley, please. The topic is the town office lawn. Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Dave Crowley. It seems to me that people of my generation frequently hearken back to a simpler time and sort of a vague notion of things being different 50 years ago. And while that notion carries with it a certain amount of inherent problems, there are some aspects of the simpler time that perhaps we can take advantage of. And they are, I suggest that for only the town office lawns and the courthouse lawn, that they be done by hand. that the sound of a push mower is much nicer to hear than a weapons grade lawn mower that looks like it should have a 50 caliber machine gun on the back of it, or the sound of a rake pulling leaves into a pile is better than a leaf blower with its 120 decibel noise, and the same with clippers and the whole thing. I suggest that in the broad strokes of downtown, this might be a small stroke that sort of simplifies and humanizes the Four Corners area. I know I'm making enemies of every city employee that I can think of to ask them to push a lawn
No, it's
mower,
more
but I've been across
labor-intensive.
that lawn, and it's a pretty sweet little lawn, and I'll tell you, pushing a lot. I know somebody's sitting there thinking, well, you do it. But no, I think it's a thought.
I'm just going to pass that right off to the town manager. I know our lawn in front of
It's a
the...
thought we don't have to respond to.
This
It's a
is it.
good thought.
Yep.
Maybe I'll get some sheep. Maybe I'll put some of my sheep down there.
You know, powerless lawn maintenance for the town office's lawn and the courthouse.
Well, you know, I don't disagree with the noise issue and everything else, but that's not the only maintenance issue that we have with our maintenance crews. We also mow and tend the lawns at a number of other facilities. I don't think that would make a real dent in the issues of noise and pollution to do that, although I do appreciate where you're coming from, David.
Okay, next time that leaf blower's outside your office window,
It's
listen
always
up.
right outside my office
Listen up.
window. I happen to be on the second floor at the front.
Okay,
Thanks, Dave.
thanks.
Dave, do you live in close proximity to the,
I beg your pardon?
do you live in close proximity to?
Yeah, I live on
Week Street.
Week Street. I walk downtown all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It always bothers me that all those guys have to wear ear protection for stuff that's so noisy. And, you know, everybody else is walking around. Should we bring our own? Anyway, thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the RBC construction loan and authorization to engage an engineer. I think we all got probably earlier today a breakdown of the progress to date. It doesn't spell out specifics on budgets and that type of thing. I think Stuart can certainly respond to where the project is right now. My hope and anticipation is that when the project is winding down, that we'll get a reconciliation of where we spent the money.
Well, this is a different project, Tom.
Yeah.
I think you're on the DPW facility.
Okay, did I jump ahead? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
This is the RBC project. It's a two-part question. The
Sorry.
first requires
Another meeting.
action by the board to actually sign the application for the loan. The total amount requested is $3,823,700. That's $3,823,700, which is approximately $900,000 less than what the engineer's estimate before the bids came in. This is the low bid, and this application requires the board to essentially approve the application by signing on the certification page, which I have with me tonight. It allows us to access those funds and to really get going.
And maybe as part of the discussion, we can talk about the bid that's been open, costs that may have been potentially saved, and also the potential additional expense for the oversight responsibility that we have.
Yeah, that's the second part of the question. The original idea or the original discussion with the engineers was that they would handle the bid packages and the bid opening for the RBCs. The original fee was estimated at about $39,700. The state has stepped in, and because of the complexity of the project, and I admit it is complex, the state has asked for some engineering oversight during the construction project, which will last approximately from March of next year into December, to install 30 units, RBC units. We have already installed 2 very successfully, but the state was looking for some additional essentially clerk of the works or engineering oversight. This is the amount that the engineers have forecast. It is $104,800. It does increase the effort substantially, and it increases the amount substantially, but the state agrees that this is an advisable effort. So in the first instance, I'm asking for approval by the board to sign the loan application. In the second instance, I'm asking for authorization to sign the engineering agreement and its first amendment dealing with the additional engineering cost.
Why don't we first deal with the RBC construction loan first, and then we'll talk about the other. Could I have a motion at least for the construction loan side of things?
So moved?
Second. Anybody?
Second.
Okay. I've got a,
We're dealing with this in two parts, right?
yeah. So at the RBC construction loan, is there any further discussion on that motion relative to authorizing that?
Gene's got something.
Gene? please.
So am I understanding correctly that the RBC unit project cost is not part of what we just voted on?
Yeah. It is.
The bond?
It is
Amount?
part of the bond.
It is.
But if you recall, there are two portions of this project. One is being bid out and will have a general contractor. That is all of the work but the RBCs. The town is undertaking to do the RBC work with its own staff,
Okay.
thereby saving money
Right.
for everyone.
Stu, why would we do something like this piecemeal? That's what I'm not clear on.
It's not piecemeal. This is the entire RBC project. This amount of money gets the 30 RBCs installed and operational.
It's just the same as what was in the budget that you showed us before.
All right.
Yes.
It's basically
This part.
authorized to go.
It's $900,000 less than we anticipated. So the bids were very, very aggressive. Both bids were less than the engineer's estimate. This is by far the lower bid.
And why is it necessary for our approval on this?
We have to make an application for the loan,
Yeah.
for the monies themselves. Even though the voters have approved the bond, the state, because it's a state revolving loan fund, the state requires that the select board, or the governing body in this case, makes the application for those monies.
And it's coming up now because all of the information relative to the bond process or need has been determined. And
It's all been,
with a
it's
bid.
it's been determined for the RBCs.
Yeah, right.
The second portion of the project, it will go out to bid probably December or January.
So I think I can entertain a vote on the actual construction loan bond process. Is there enough information that you have on that part of it?
On the first part?
Yeah, yeah. Good. All in favor of that RBC construction loan? Aye. That's 6 in favor, I believe. Right. Yeah.
I have a signature page that I will circulate. I had to add lines because the state only provides 5. If your signatures are clear enough, I can print your names.
Then,
Otherwise, please print your own names.
then we're going to the authorization to engage an engineer. And
Yes.
That was a different.
This is the second piece, and to give you an idea of the agreement, this is the engineering agreement, the original agreement for $39,000, whatever it is, $700 or something like that. Yes, there's a lot of boilerplate in it, but it tells us what the engineer is going to do for us. It deals with all the liabilities and the risk and everything else. This is the First Amendment, 1 page. That's a signature page. The part I included in your packet was the page that showed the original cost at $39,700 plus the additional cost at $104,800. And I'm asking for your authorization to sign both the agreement and the amendment so that we can get to work here. Remember, the RBCs is the principal assurance of discontinuance project. We have to have this in place by December of 2018, and there is lead time in making these units, lead time in delivering these units, and we are going to be installing them over the course of next summer. So that's what I'm looking for. The engineers had indicated a willingness to come down. I told them that this is relatively straightforward. I understand why the state is requiring it. It is state monies that they're loaning us. We will ultimately pay them back, but they have a concern that they'd like a little bit more oversight on this particular part of the project than was originally planned.
Okay. For the purposes of the discussion, could I at least have a motion authorizing the engagement of the engineer with the contract as proposed and amended, I guess, initially? Could I at least have a motion?
Yes, so moved.
Got a motion?
Second.
Second. Discussion on that contract and amendment. Please, because, please. Start? Yeah, no, go ahead. I'll defer to you guys.
I'm good?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think we're all thinking what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You can get that mic a little closer there, Carson, because, thanks.
Being that this is a two-part project, just referencing the RBC side of it now,
Yes.
are these projects currently on site working in unison for the most part? So our guys are working on the RBC project, and the additional tasks that we're outsourcing, that had an engineer on site already overseeing that project?
It will have. That project has not yet been let. It has yet to be bid. It is all the work but the RBCs.
Yeah.
The RBCs we've pushed forward because of the state assurance of discontinuance, requiring us to have these in place. It actually, from a logistics point of view, it makes sense for us to get going first so that we don't have two major contracts going on the site at the very same time. We hope to be a little bit ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So this project is first. The second project, which was another 4.3 or 4.4 million estimated, will follow, and that'll be spread throughout the project site.
And you know why I was asking, because if that particular project will have an engineer on site, and the hope would be to try to avoid the significant increase in amount, that we could potentially not have an engineer just watching our staff. And I know they're going to be hands-on, but as you said, I would rather take that, save the money. And I know you've looked at it from every angle, but it's the first crossroads here, and it's a significant jump. If we could have a conversation with the state, and I know that might not be the easiest of conversations, but
I don't mind having that conversation. I mean, I understand the state's demand.
I get it. I mean, I'm not questioning that. It's
And
just
they
if we-
want, typically, they like daily oversight of projects ongoing in a project of this size. So the engineer will be with us when the first RBCs arrive, and ultimately probably split his time between the two projects. But this was a cost that initially the engineers thought they wouldn't need to have that oversight because the project is relatively straightforward. It's the state that is saying, well, look, we'd really like to see you be there. And I mean, I haven't debated the cost that they've come up with.
But is it worth them representing us back to the state to say, you know, this was a straightforward project, these individuals are experts on the site, and I'm saying this all in an attempt to not have that individual here at a daily level, because that cost is...
I'd be glad to carry that message.
I think what we're all not struggling for, but is we thought when we went to the bond request for the voters that it was all inclusive in meaning it had all the approvals from the state. Now we're finding out the state wants to change the rules on us after we've gone to the bond. And it makes you uncomfortable, because are we going to be changing that again at some point? Because the voters expect to get the project for something that they voted for, and now we're asking another $100,000, or it's not a total 100. We had 30-something budgeted into it.
Right.
And it just seems like if we had the approvals, why are we now, at the 11th hour, being subject to basically being held up?
And will we be subject to fines because it's not done within the timeframe that the...
Perhaps. Let me take that question back to the engineer as to the specifics of how they came up with this number, what we expect to get for the dollars. And if we can get them down, if we can negotiate down with the engineers that the state will approve, then I'll be back to you at the next meeting.
And just to further that, maybe that instead of being there every day, maybe if they have a weekly or bi-weekly site visit to make sure we're on track, then that would be sufficient versus that individual being there every day, because
Well,
I mean, that cost is a lot.
I think the individual will more than likely, once the other project gets going, be there every day.
Be there already,
Because it's
so
very,
then-
very complicated, so I'll do that.
It is true that if we're putting 3 or 4 million into into a whole new array of RBCs, we want to get them in right, and we want them to last for 20 or 30 years. So, you know, we do want to get the work done properly. Stu, what's the net between the cost savings that we had by having the bid come in lower, and is it fair to think of these as in the same project, the cost savings we had in this bid
Yes,
as well as
this will cut into the cost savings.
So the cost savings was what again?
900,000.
Okay. And so, so we're still well below what the voters have approved?
Yes. And in fact, I can tell you that the staff and I have been having conversations about if in fact there is one of those projects that was on the list of what we're not going to do, that we can do with the excess funds and thereby eliminate a future situation, we'll probably be back suggesting to you folks that we go ahead and design and bid another portion of this project that we had not intended to do, rather than, because we are borrowing the full amount of the bond, 9.85 million, and we can choose to borrow less, or we can choose to do more. But we'll be back to you on that.
That's great. And to Carson's point, the more we save, the more of those things we could do. So
Exactly.
if our engineer feels like they can do it with a lighter oversight and still deliver the same quality, then we should push for that.
I'll get
And
back
at
to
one point in the project, they're going to parallel each other, so he or she may be there already budgeted it in. So I just think that was,
Yep. Great.
Very good
Thank you,
question.
Stuart.
Jeannie, you have any other comments on that?
No,
Because
I
know
think,
that was an earlier-
I think you
Yeah.
two have covered it, yeah.
Yeah. I would like you, it's not just Tom's opinion, I think we're all in agreement that it's the whole select board agrees that we would like to push back a little bit.
Okay.
I think that's it. You know what we're looking for. It's basically,
Yes, I
they're
do.
coming in at the 11th hour, changing the rules. And maybe it isn't the 11th hour to the state, but it is to us. And so, good. Is there anything else? Do you need authorization? Can you wait till the next meeting? Or not?
Yeah, yes, we can.
Good.
I'll be back to you by the next meeting.
No vote.
On the first one?
Oh, we haven't voted on?
No, we're not going to
voting.
vote on the second
I
one.
We're not going to vote on the
We're gonna
second.
hold it.
Until we get that in.
Hold on the second one, because I got to go back to him.
And I apologize for confusing the world at the beginning of that. Now let's have some very informative discussion. Jeannie, could you just open the dialogue on the seedling program?
Yes,
We're looking forward
yes,
to
I
that.
would love to do that. All right, so it's my pleasure to actually give you a little background on the Seedlings program and to introduce our two wonderful staff people. And Loriana and Sarah, if you want to come up, please do. So the Seedlings program came out of the community forums that the Vermont Council on Rural Development held back in 2012 in Bennington. And it involved,
Time
it was a
flies.
long time ago. It involved a huge portion of the Bennington community. And at that time, we came up with 4 areas of concern for this community that we wanted to pursue. And one of those areas was poverty. And so a poverty working group was established, and Charlie Jingo was our fearless leader. And out of that poverty working group came several initiatives. One of them was Seedlings, which we'll talk with you about tonight. And another was the Oral Health Coalition. Another was an enhanced Renters 101. And then there were also some housing initiatives that came out of that. So in the Seedlings program, it was specifically designed to address some of the gaps in achievement that children in poverty often experience. And 3 areas that are seen as critical in closing that gap are first, building academic skills, second, helping children develop resilience and self-confidence, and third, helping to build positive community connections. These goals are also critical to making Bennington the healthiest community it can be, and also are vital to our economic success because today's children are tomorrow's workforce. One of the correlations that, is well known in education circles that the Annie E. Casey Foundation has been researching for a number of years is that you can determine a child's success in high school by their third grade reading levels. So what they have seen is that students who are not working at grade level by the end of third grade are 4 to 13 times less likely to complete high school on time or to complete high school at all. So programs like Seedlings are very helpful in bridging that gap and helping all of our kids succeed. So with that, I'd like to introduce Loriana and Sarah. Loriana Weathers is our program manager this year. She came to us last year from South Georgia and loved the snow and being in Vermont, and so has stayed here a second year and is the program manager for Seedlings. And then Sarah Truax joined us 2.5 months ago, is that right? From Michigan. And she is amazing and has already done some really incredible things for the Seedlings program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you two.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for the intro. Go.
So I'll start it off with a very short video that we made. Short as in 3 minutes. I want to keep the volume low to begin with, and we'll turn it up if we need it. Oh, okay, we're going to need it.
Seedlings is an after-school program at Bennington and Molly Stark Elementary. We provide tutoring, mentoring, creative play, and supplemental snack. Students collectively spend 1,413 hours in the Seedlings program, with 471 of those hours spent in private tutoring. That breaks down to 130 hours of programming per child and 43 hours of private tutoring each year.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity for people to volunteer with the children here. They're great.
You can volunteer after school on Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday for only an hour and a half each week.
One of the things that I learned from the Seedlings students is they really are passionate. They want to hear. They want to feel that somebody cares.
I think a lot of what Seedlings is about is building relationships with young people. And what a lot of people don't realize is not only do the young people benefit from this experience, after school mentoring, structured activities, but a lot of the young people that we bring to mentor our elementary school students also learn a great deal.
I was instantly attracted to the Seedlings program at my school, Bennington College, where I was introduced to it. So I come here every week, and it's just really amazing to get to bond with the kids and just really like have fun. Do you have one when you go?
I have plans.
Me too.
In some ways, we mentor each other.
What I have discovered is what they really just want is to be loved, to pay attention to, and we just have to want to be interested.
Seedlings program needs to raise roughly $25,000 every year from our Bennington community in order to provide this free service for students. Visit seedlingsprogram.com to find out how you can volunteer and how you can donate.
Okay, so that was a little video we made to kind of cover some stuff. But I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the program. Okay, so we're after-school program at Bennington and Molly Stark Elementary, and we provide snack, private tutoring, creative play, and community programming, and some lunchtime mentoring as well. We're serving 22 students this year, and our program starts in the 1st grade, and we continue to 6th grade to make that transition into middle school with these students. For the students to be in our program, they need to qualify for a free and reduced lunch. And we like to have students that do not have a parent in the household or guardian in the household that has a degree. When we let the teachers and the administrators also recommend students for us, because a lot of times they know who will be the best fit in the program. And we like for the guardians to make a long-term commitment, because we want these students to stay until they are able to graduate out after 6th grade. So a typical day at Seedlings would be, the first thing is we come in and we have snack, and the schools there provide a dinner program, and then we bring an additional snack for the students, which oftentimes looks like a treat that gets to come in. And so here are a couple pictures of them enjoying snack. And then they have tutoring. So we have 8 students in a group, and we'll have 4 tutors come in. And they will pull half of those students away. They'll pull 4 students to come with them to a separate room and tutor privately for 30 minutes. And then when they're done with that, they'll come and get the remaining 4 students, and they'll get their private 30 minutes as well with the tutors. And so when they're doing that, we get goals from their teachers. We'll get a math and a literacy goal. And it might not be on grade level. Chances are it's probably not. But it's something that student, it's very specific to that child. And so they want to work on that to hopefully catch them up to what's going on in the classroom. And so that's what they work on with the tutors. And then they'll be assessed to see how they're doing with that. And when they meet that goal, they can receive a new goal from their teacher. And so at the end of last year, we had 70% of our students meeting the English goal, and then 77% meeting the math goal. So it's 31% of our students were able to receive a new goal by the end of the year. And some of the community programming we do is really, we just want to show them what Bennington has to offer, because there's a lot of stuff out there, and most of it they haven't been able to experience yet. And so we try to do that within our program. We started going to the Bennington Museum last year. We took our 3rd graders once every 2 weeks. And this year we're going back. We've been able to take everybody at least once, and then in the spring we're going to go once every week to the Bennington Museum to explore, learn about local artists, and kind of learn how to navigate a gallery and a lot of things that they haven't been able to do yet. We were able to go to Cat TV, and they filmed their own public service announcement. They did the filming, they did the interviewing, they did it all. And then once a month, we either have the Bennington Free Library come to us, or we go to the library. And so they all have library cards now, which is really exciting. And they know that space, they know the library and what it's like being in there. We were able to go to Southern Vermont College this year already, and we were to take everyone with us, and so they got to meet the head coach out there and the student athletic committee. And they provided games for them and activities, and so the students got to be on that campus and hang out with those students and run around and have a lot of games, and they're really excited to go back. I think the school's excited to have us back. It was a really positive experience. They've worked with a few artists, and this artist in particular, they'll go back to Bennington College to work with him in January and see the studios. They've been able to do printmaking. And then we're also going to One World Conservation Center this year. Once a week, the students will go, and they get to learn about their environment. They get to see this space that's in Bennington. We learned about composting last week. So it's a really fun time for them to really be out in the community. And then we do a lot of creative play and just social interaction with the students, and learning to interact with their peers and with adults. And so that can look like a lot of things for what we might do in the day. And sometimes it's just playing on the playground or reading a book. And then sometimes it's really interacting with the kids and the volunteers, making up games, playing old games. It can look like a lot of stuff. And so our volunteers, we have 28 volunteers right now, and it's really a volunteer-run program. We would not exist without the people of Bennington coming together and working with us for this. And so that is the volunteers include the after-school groups, also the lunchtime mentoring. They come in and have lunch and recess with a student once a week, and then our board members as well. And so that's college students from CCV, SBC, and Bennington College, retired teachers, high school students, professors. So we have a really awesome group of volunteers. And then we also, depend on our local and statewide supporters that have helped fund us throughout this. And of course, the newest grant we just received was the Ben & Jerry's Foundation grant, which was really awesome. And so we really depend on these local places to help us out. And then also here's some just contact information. This is the website, and then my email if you want to reach out. But if you have any questions, we're open.
Thank you. Folks, this is great. Would you entertain some discussion and questions?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, good. Folks?
I'd love to know a little bit about your limits to capacity. Sounds so great. It'd be wonderful to do a lot of it. So what are the constraints, both financial and sort of people power?
Well, we're only 4 years old, so I think we're kind of figuring that out as we go along, too. We're at 22 students this year, and then we're going to gain even another new pod by the end of the year, hopefully, which will add another 6 students to that. If we could be everywhere, it would be nice. We would like to eventually move into Pownall, maybe Monument, and our newest pod will open up a second pod at Molly Stark, so we'll have 2 pods at Benell, 2 groups of children at Molly Stark by the end of this year, and then eventually hoping going out into the community more. I think we're figuring it out. How much can we grow?
So it's more of a capacity of available labor than money?
It's a little bit of both because we're volunteer run. We have different volunteers each day. So we have our group of Monday volunteers at Bennington Elementary, a group of Monday volunteers at Molly Stark. And so, just for our 3 days we meet at both schools, that's close to 30 volunteers we'll end up having with substitutes coming in and a few more volunteers on certain days. So volunteers play a part in it, and also money. It's a lot of management, probably more than it looks sometimes. So yeah, like working with the students and the programming in the community, and then the volunteers as well.
Looks like most of the money's private, is that right? Comes in from donations and
grants.
Supporters, and is it some public grants as well?
Yes.
So is it about
No public grants right now,
it's all private grants at this point?
with Title I funding.
Are they competitive grants? Like,
They are competitive grants, yes.
It's great.
That's really amazing.
Great. Keep bringing that good stuff to Bennington.
Yeah. So
Thank
you've
you.
been really running the program for about 4 years. Is that correct?
Yes, 4 years. So our oldest students right now, they started in 1st grade and they're in 4th grade. They're like the
great.
big kids on campus currently.
The goals that are established they're not necessarily grade goals?
No, most of them are not. So they can be very, we might have a 2nd grader that is doing a lot of, ABCs. So sometimes they're not grade level at all. But so that they're not sitting in class and things are going,
Right.
over. So it's to catch them up, to get them where they're in class and they're learning and they're not falling behind.
And what we did find was this year, we had several kids in 3rd grade reading at 3rd grade,
Great.
which is really, what
That's-
we want to do. So the hope is by the time they are at middle school, they're doing middle school work.
That's just the question that was perfect.
I think what you're doing is great work. There was something on NPR in the last several days about kids who become complacent and uninvolved in the classroom. Are you aware of that? They sort of give up. And this, I think, addresses that directly. Secondly, the fact that you're involving these kids with college students. You're taking the fear, because the fear of the unknown for little kids can direct and control their lives. Finally, I want to compliment you on the idea of this, and I can see this going nationwide, and that you might want to apply for some federal funding, taking this to places in the inner city like New York, Chicago, Boston. Man, you could transform the lives of kids that don't have the support of their parents, or not that they don't have the support, but whose parents are not quite as involved in their lives. This could be, transformative on so many levels. So I compliment you.
Thank you.
I just had a couple things. In just trying to hear everything out, you put a request in the beginning that you're looking for a development effort of an additional $25,000 to your annual budget. Is that a number that was set in the beginning?
Yes.
Okay. So you have a lot of local support, whether they be all private in this case, but you are looking for an additional $25,000 through donations and philanthropic efforts.
Yes, we are.
That's good to know. And is it public information to say, that's in addition to your budget of what it is now? Is that a big percentage, or you don't need to put it in dollars? I won't put you on the spot, but I mean, is $25,000 going to move the meter like 25% more, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
so the budget with tutoring
Great.
is around 100,000.
Okay.
believe it or not.
I set these questions up a little bit because it's important for the
Yeah.
people to hear what you're looking for and why, so it's just good for potential donors. And then they grade out at 6th grade, is that what you said? So there's 22 kids, that's not per grade, that's in total.
Yeah, in total. So different ones will reach that 6th grade mark.
Yeah.
And
And
then
your
as they-
highest is 4th right now. So you bring on only a few kids annually?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like we've had a couple of students move, and so we replace them, and we try and keep it as low as possible. So if we
Yeah.
have a group, a pod of students that are 3rd and 4th grade, we might try and fill in with 2nd graders so that they can stay in longer, but they're still together. And then as they grow out and graduate in 6th grade, then we'll be able to open up another pod.
So Carson, a pod is generally 8 students. So what we have now is a pod that's 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders, and now we're starting another 1st grade pod at Bennell, and then we will do that same thing at Momley.
Okay.
So the idea is to have sort of 2 rotating pods, one older pod and one younger pod.
Right. And sorry, I'm not familiar with it, so I appreciate you guys kind of
Yeah.
bringing it down so I can understand it.
It's amazing. I've known about it for a long time, but I had no idea that they were doing that much cool stuff. I mean, I knew about the museum, but I didn't know about Southern Vermont College and all the other cool stuff that you're doing, so that's really wonderful. I have one, kind of just logistical question, and that is, do the volunteers that start out with a pod stay with that pod? Okay, I didn't know.
They do. It's
Okay.
really nice, because some of them have
So they really
watched
get
these
to see them grow and.
students from 1st and now in 4th
Yeah,
grade.
must be hard to see them go, actually, at the end. And my other question is, I'm assuming, and maybe I shouldn't assume, that at least some of these children probably have issues in the classroom that are not academic, they're more behavioral because of their situation. So what are you noticing as far as their behavior in the classroom, because they're getting, having developed these wonderful relationships and feeling loved, like one of the volunteers mentioned? What are you noticing?
I was just thinking about there's a survey sheet, that surveys that parents and teachers fill out at the end of each year. And I think one of the common threads is that students look forward to being in school more, and that they are more engaged in school. And I do think that has something to do with just building self-confidence and feeling like
Yeah, absolutely.
you
Taking
can be
away their
successful.
frustration.
So therefore, you're willing to put more effort into being successful.
And do the kids that are in the pod, they must develop really deep friendships, I would imagine.
Yeah, they do. And some of them don't see each other so much in the day if they're 3rd or 2nd grade. But because they're with each other 3 times a week after school, they do still develop that friendship and those bonds. It's a little family.
Yeah.
Jeannie, this came out of the
great.
poverty work group, right?
It did.
It's, we have to just say, every once in a while, we have to stop and say, the block and tackle work that's so boring and it seems like it goes, sometimes goes nowhere, can lead to some really great things. So when Paul Costello brought the Vermont Council for Rural Development, sat right down here for a community conversation, lots of people came, lots of big conversations. One of the things that came out of that was the poverty work group, and you've met every month, came up with this idea, sort of brought this thing forward to our community. So for people who think that change is quick, it's not always quick, but it involves a lot of hard work. And I think, you're a great example of somebody in our community who, or your group is a great example of a group of people in our community that haven't given up, have taken on the hard issue of poverty and decided, here's one thing we can do about it, and kept at it. So I am so thankful that both that we had that initial community conversation, but even more that you folks were willing to, Charlie Jingo and the rest of the people in your group were willing to take the ball and run with it and make this great outcome from it. So thank you.
Which is really pretty amazing. You folks have really given of yourselves because, you know, it's so aptly named, seedling. You know, you don't get the tall maples without having the seed. And you started with the seed, and you can see that that's the core of that is taking shape into a real tree for our community. Seedling is a program that we can only wish for continued and growing success. And if you need support from the community, make sure that we are a way to get that out to the community.
I appreciate it. Yeah. And these guys are
Thank
fantastic.
you.
Yeah.
They work all the time.
It's good. Keep up the great effort. Enjoy the winter. And from
will.
Michigan, it's a piece of cake. From Georgia, not so much.
Learn to ski.
Yes,
Learn to ski.
yes, yes.
Prospect Mountain.
Do you have any questions of us?
No, I
Good,
don't
great.
think so.
Good. Well, thank you for sharing your time with us tonight.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. We do have some brochures in my card that we're going to pass out to everyone.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. The next item on the agenda is an Act 46 update. Are you going to step down there, please? Yep, thanks. Yep. Next item on the agenda is an update on the Act 46 process. Just so it's clear, this is not an effort by the board to provide its resolution support or otherwise to 46, but it's important as part of our community responsibility to make sure that the information that is available is out in the community. CAT TV provides a great opportunity for that purpose. I know Donald has been chairperson of the Act 46 committee, which has been dealing with this challenge for over a year now, and it's coming to fruition in November 9th? Or
November 7th.
November 7th. Donald is just going to give an update relative to the committee's activities, and we can decide as a board what we want to do at a later date.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, great. So I sit here with my Act 46 chairman hat on and not my select board hat. I'd like to just make sure that that distinction that you've already made is really clear. So,
Thanks, Don.
but thank you for letting me present very briefly. So there are a couple of dates that are really important, and the first one is this Thursday, October 26th at 7 p.m. There's going to be a forum at Mount Anthony High School auditorium, and we'll have some legislators there, and we will have members of the Act 46 committee, and we will be doing a relatively deep dive on what Act 46 is and what it means to our community. So if you would indulge me, I'll just give a very brief description to the board tonight. Act 46 is the law of the land. It was created by the legislature in response to declining student numbers throughout the state, and a real focus on a need to increase equity of quality in education, to increase achievement levels in education, to maximize efficiency, to promote transparency and accountability, and to deliver good value for education dollars. And I think maybe the biggest misconception about this Act 46 thing is what it actually is doing. It's a kind of nuanced thing, but it's very important. It's a governance merger. So what the issue is in our area, and I'll just take us as an example, is that we have roughly 7 boards and 40 some odd, 45, 47 board members that are on these various school boards around, and frequently board members will run unopposed, or towns will have trouble rustling up enough board members, and so you have a very kind of disparate governance structure. We're lucky in that we have an SU, the supervisory union, that has most of these schools under it, and so we already have more or less merged many of the functions. We're ahead of many school districts in the fact that we do have this SU. The the state has concluded, and there's a lot of research, the Act 46 committee has actually been going on for 3 years. I joined it as a citizen. It was just board members for a while, then they invited some citizen members to come in, which is when I joined it, and then in this third year, it's also been citizens and school board members. But essentially what's happened is the state has given communities a time period to try to merge of their own volition, using things that are important to the community as decision makers for what that merger looks like. And the state is saying if you don't merge and you don't create structures that hit these goals of equality and achievement and efficiency and whatnot, then we will come down and merge the schools for you. And so the Act 46 committee has taken this charge very seriously, and we've worked up what we believe is a good merger proposal. It is not in any way perfect. By the time we were making this, we were down to 3 options, and one of them was admit failure. And so the other 2 were the one that we selected, and then a third one that would have resulted in another board. But what this proposal essentially puts forward is that Woodford, the communities of Woodford, Pownell, Shaftesbury, and Bennington, but not North Bennington and not District 1 of Shaftesbury, which goes with North Bennington, that Bennington, Pownell, Woodford, Shaftesbury would have an opportunity to vote on a governance merger structure. And that when they do vote on the governance merger, it would give us an opportunity to tell the state what we would like that to look like. So the research the state has cited, and most of the research that we've seen, indicates that school districts should be something, the optimal size is something in the 2,000 to 4,000 range students. And nationally, school districts are usually kind of 4,000 or 5,000 in an average size. Some of them are much larger, but average size is 4,000 or 5,000. And as it happens, we have about 3,000 students in our SU. And so we have a feeling that that's something that the state would look at as a viable educational size. So when this merger gets voted on, it would essentially, it would combine the boards, if it was approved, it would combine the boards of the Woodford, Pownell, Shaftesbury, Bennington school boards, and North Bennington would still remain roughly its own little entity for the grade school. They would be part of, if this merger was approved, they would be part of the merged district for high school, but they would have to recuse on the elementary school things. And that's because they have school choice, so they're a little bit different from the rest of the school districts. They don't fit in this merger. And we spent a tremendous amount of time working on that, and spent a tremendous amount of time with the Agency of Education trying to get that sorted out, and trying not to do something that took them backwards in their mind, or having something happen that wasn't productive for us. So there are a couple of things about this merger, and I really would love to ask this board to support this at whatever level you can. But the most important thing to me about this merger is not the tax incentives, although there are some significant tax incentives. So, for example, Bennington alone in the first year would see tax savings that would be equivalent to cutting our school budget $1.4 million. So imagine you could go to the school budget and just lop $1.4 million off of it. That's what it would be like for the first year in Bennington. The incentives drop off quite quickly, so they're not a really good reason to make a decision unless it's the right decision, but they're also not small money. But that's not the reason to do this. The reason to do this is to provide a more equal education, and more than anything else, in my mind, to create a board governance structure that works for all of our communities. So I think it's probably not hyperbolic to say that the time of school closings could be coming at some point in the future. We've all read the news. There's a lot of money trouble in Montpelier right now with education funding. I think that the most important thing that we can do for our community, for the strength of our community at this point, is to band together and pick a structure that we know works and pick a structure that lets all the communities feel strong and well represented. So what the merger study, this product of the Act 46 committee, proposes is that we use the structure that we already know and that already seems to work well for us, which is the Mount Anthony board structure. And that is not directly proportional, but it's a formula that was worked out back in the 60s and then codified in the 70s through a legal challenge. And what that does is it gives every community a reasonable size seat at the table. So while Bennington has the most students, it's also very important that Shaftesbury feels heard, that Woodford feels heard, that Pownell feels heard when big decisions are being made. An example might be a school closing. So if Bennington had all of the, had a majority vote on the new district board, it could vote unilaterally to close schools in the surrounding districts. If the other small schools felt that there was a good reason not to do that and there was a little bit more balance, it would have to be a decision that everybody came to together. So it would have to be a decision that was carefully wrought and was worked out among all the different communities. And I think that balance of, call it balance of power, but that balance of decision-making has served our community really well in the Mount Anthony board structure. And by putting it forward in this proposal, we're putting forward something that is not strictly proportional, although Act 46 does indicate that proportionality is a very important piece of this, but is something that has worked very well for our community and has worked especially well in terms of keeping our small communities involved. So Jim, you were talking about what happens when students kind of abdicate or when they just lose interest. I think my fear with this board structure is that if the small communities don't feel like they have a substantial voice and don't feel like their voice really counts, there's going to be a certain amount of attrition and people are just going to lose interest. So hopefully, if this merger goes forward, we can continue to have this board structure that's worked so well for us. And we've also loaded in a few other things which are important. They're somewhat more, they're a little bit smaller, but nevertheless important. The state default is to set a policy that no schools could be closed for up to 4 years. We felt it was important for our small schools to extend that, so we actually have put additional protections into our merger plan that would make it 5 years. And if this district board was going to close a school, it could not do it on a majority vote. It would have to do it on a supermajority vote of 75%. So that, again, there would have to be large buy-in from all the communities. And the idea here is that we're all in this together. These are all our kids, as Jackie Prue would say. And Shaftesbury and Bennington and Pownell, Woodford, we work well when we work together. And so I think the idea that we make it harder to close these small schools is important, not just for our small schools, but also for Bennington too, because having these small schools strong makes our community strong. The other thing that we've built into here, and there's a lot of questions about how this would actually work, but we've indicated that the committee's indicated that we would like the new district to work very hard to provide some sort of inter-district school choice, so that if you are living in Shaftesbury but you work in Williamstown and Shaftesbury is not working out for you and you want to send your student to Pownell instead, that you can make an easy shift within the district, within the public schools of the district for grade school choice. There are a lot of problems, and how does that get worked out with transportation, and what about enrollment numbers, and there are a lot of details that haven't been worked out, but we've put forward that we think that would be an important concept, kind of getting at that equity piece a little bit, but also making sure that people feel like they have some choice where it's easy to provide. So that's the gist of it, and I don't want to go into it in any more detail than that, but I will tell you that the reason I've worked on this so hard for the past year and a half is that I feel like one of the most important things we can do for our community is really bear down on our educational system and make sure that we're running a very efficient system that has really good delivery of both content but also resources, that teachers can be easily shared and deployed between schools, that potentially magnet schools could be developed within our district so that you could have a little school that was particularly good at something. People might be able to go there if that was an interest of them. That we can allow for a certain amount of both efficiency and creativity if we put these under a single board structure. So that, it's my hope that this will move forward. I think it's important to note that if this merger doesn't pass on November 7th, that we will not have another opportunity to vote on it. And by June of 2018, the Secretary of Education will announce how things are going to look. And they will come down and essentially merge communities that they feel are not, merge districts that they feel are not large enough or productive enough to be sustainable on their own.
It's great, Donald, and that's really a very good update. And it's not totally coincidental that the seedling program preceded your update, because the education component of why this board sits here, we've talked about economic development as our mantra, but you know, the challenges have been, a good part of it is with poverty and education, and they're hand in glove. And the seedling program, this merger opportunity, which we're taking our own future in our own hands, is an effort to deal with that on the grand scale of things, because we're not going to be able to have an economic, healthy community unless we have a strong educational system that services all, including the region, because our region is Shaftesbury, Pownell, and Woodford, and we're all in it, as you said earlier, together. And while I don't think it's probably appropriate, because this is advertised as an update, that we take a stand, but this is a critically important decision that the towns are going to have to make, and make themselves. Otherwise, the state will come in at some given point in time, and the result might not be beneficial to the long-term educational benefit of our town.
There are a lot of wonky details that will be rolled out on the 26th for everybody who likes lots of wonky details, but maybe the one important thing to know is that of the 4 communities that will be voting on this, Bennington is necessary, which means that if Bennington does not vote for this, no merger happens, and that Pownell, Shaftesbury, and Woodford are advisable, and 2 of those 3 need to vote to proceed for us to adopt this merger proposal with the MAU board structure. And if Bennington and 2 other communities do not vote for it, then we leave ourselves up to the whims of the state. Great. So, thank you.
Thank you for the update. Are we going to be talking about the municipal policy adoption, or are we just
Zerat is here this evening to present this. This is a necessary adoption. And Zerat can explain it better than I can, but it is required.
So I've shared with you the revised municipal or updated municipal policies and codes, which we have to provide and adopt for every grant that we receive from the state, and it's mandatory for all our community development grants. So our most recent municipal policies and codes expired in August, and this is the new one, and once we adopt it, it'll be valid for the next 10 years. And this is actually, these are the policies and codes that we have to verify to the state for every single grant that we get. So once it's signed, the reason it kind of stays adopted for the next 10 years is because otherwise I would have to come to you with it every few weeks. But as I provided in my summary, it's largely the same as the previous policies and codes. Have modified it, mainly provided greater detailing or detail for some of the policies. As I said, with the equal employment opportunity, some of that was more kind of abstract in the past. Now they've kind of specified what that entails. I've discussed this with Michelle Johnson, who oversees HR for the town, and she said we're basically already in compliance with federal laws. So this isn't so much departing from any of that, but making it much more explicit in some ways.
Great. I'll open it for a motion to accept the adoption of the new policies and codes as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion on it. Questions to
I have
Zerwatt?
a question, if I
Please,
may.
please.
Yeah, so Zerwatt, where are we? Is this, I meant to call you about this earlier this week, ran out of time. I apologize for doing it on air. I meant to do it before we got here. But is this something which is boilerplate for the rest of the state, or is this something that we've written for ourselves? Are there opportunities for minor edits, or is this something that is, we have to take it hook, line, and sinker?
That's a good question. My understanding is that it's a boilerplate template that we're given. There's not a lot of room to modify because these are things that the state wants us to comply with in order to get their money as well. So, I mean, as I went through it, I was wondering like how much of it is, you know, we can kind of make it our own and tweak it maybe a little bit here and there. But my understanding is because this comes very much out of both federal and state legislation, there's not a lot of room to say, well, our version, for example, of the drug enforcement policy will look a bit differently. So in the past, it had room for a bit of that, but I think now they're really putting out the guidelines for that enforcement needs to take the shape of what is enlisted in this policy.
Well, I asked for a fairly specific reason, and I do have a suggestion, but I'm not sure there's room for it. So is it possible to give the suggestion and then
I'm happy
gets
to
rejected if it doesn't?
Absolutely. If you provide it, I will, and
Please,
I'm happy to
okay.
double check.
Please.
So I guess my one concern is really sort of a health and safety concern. You know, I'm generally very in favor of all of this stuff, and I think it's all really important, and I think it's the way we live a lot of times. But I worry about, on page 4, on the excessive, use of excessive force policy, that it doesn't look like there's a cutout for situations where you might have a health and safety risk. So imagine that you have too many people in a building that might collapse, or imagine you have people that are doing a quiet protest on private property or something like that. And I wondered if it would be appropriate to add this sort of parenthetical statement at the end that says that this municipality prohibits the use of excessive force, and number 2, that it prohibits its law enforcement agencies from physically barring entrance to or exit from a facility or location that is the subject of a nonviolent civil rights demonstration, comma, except when entrance to a facility violates local, state, or federal building code or otherwise presents a threat to human safety or is private property.
Oh, boy.
No?
I can't speak to it because it's probably a issue relative to our attorney giving us an opinion as to that last part, private property and the context of that. I think I was with you until that very last.
Suppose they come to your house and have a civil in your living room. That's a location, right? So it seems like the police should have the ability to say, no, I'm sorry, you can't go into Mr. Jacobs' house.
Because there's too many people.
Because it's a private residence.
This prohibits the law enforcement agencies.
This says it prohibits law enforcement agencies from physically barring entrance to a facility or a location.
Yeah, that is subject of a nonviolent civil rights demonstration.
But a facility or location could be a private residence. It could be a rickety old wooden building that has an occupancy of 20 people upstairs. Maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, but it feels a little bit...
I imagine that there's a lot of caveat in nonviolent civil demonstration, or civil rights demonstration. So I think that's perhaps used as a, kind of some kind. I mean, I imagine some of how this is monitored is predicated on what is deemed nonviolent.
Don't you think, like these are...
But I don't want to think too much like a lawyer and take Tom's
This is
place
like the U.S.
here.
Code. This is one section of it. and whether or not the subsection after that starts to get into more definitions.
There are no definitions of facility or location, though.
I don't know what section 5304, section 2 is. I mean,
Well, just to think along the lines that Donald is talking about, if we define location, just for one example, as someone's home and they're doing this unlawfully, that's trespassing. See where I'm going with that?
It doesn't necessarily say that, though. It says prohibits.
No, it
law
doesn't, but
enforcement
the
agencies
law
from
on
using the wrong
trespassing,
inference.
the law on trespassing is the law on trespassing. You can't go into somebody's private home and hold a civil rights demonstration without their consent.
yeah, I just don't want to get into a great dialogue on this, but I do think the question's been raised, and why can't we get an answer and then move on it? Is there a critical timeline here?
I think for this one, I imagine we would need to get this uploaded before we before we sign the Putnam grant resolution potentially. So I could look into this and try and bring this back to you before maybe our next meeting or at our next meeting.
I guess my feeling is this is very much boilerplate and probably not going to get into a great degree of review until there's an issue. But this policy's been in place for 10 years.
Yes.
And it doesn't look like it's been overly modified.
This is new.
Yeah. But
This section.
this section is?
Brand new. Yeah, it wasn't in the previous policy.
Okay. But I would suggest then come back with an opinion as to whether or not we can make an amendment. If the opinion is yes, then I think that we can entertain a discussion at that point.
Okay.
I don't want to be entertaining talk about it if we can't do it.
I'd be perfectly happy just with a very clear answer that there is a cutout for health and human safety and private property. If that's the way, if that's what's, I don't know the legal details of this, but if that's what this really reads, I'd be happy to approve it the way it is. But I'm not sure that it does read that way.
Do we want to take the vote? And if it does read that way, then we're good to go.
We need a motion.
Go ahead and make a motion.
You brought it, you put the motion out there the way you
Did
want
make a
it.
motion.
Yep.
Can we exclude this in the motion?
No, then we're probably not approving it.
Yeah. Why don't, we can approve it.
amend it later.
And if you want to offer an amendment to the motion, if we approve it, that will say we would like this amended, and if that can be made and everybody agrees and it flies, then we can add it too, without having Xerox having come back.
Correct.
So we approve it as presented, if we do.
In the event.
And then make an amendment based upon what you're saying, and if that, we can vote on that too, present it to Xerox and the authorities that have to review it, and if they say fine, good, and if it doesn't fly, then we'll have to rely upon it.
I recognize that communities all over Vermont have signed this, and this may be a little bit fuzzy.
Yeah, but a lot of folks haven't taken the time like you to look at it in any great detail, and it's a very broad brush. But obviously, we need that broad brush in order to make applications for the federal and state grants that we do.
And I think if it's a matter of, I imagine, Donald, some of it is perhaps what you're asking is making explicit what they might be assuming is implicit within this.
So why don't, do I have a motion on the adoption of it as presented tonight?
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion on that? All in favor signify by aye. Okay. Is there an amendment that you would like to offer for board consideration, Donald? And then using that same...
So I would like to offer an amendment that we add a comma and then except when entrance to a facility violates local, state, or federal building code or otherwise presents a threat to human safety or is private property.
Okay. Heard the motion. Second?
Second.
Good. Discussion on that motion. You want to talk about it some more? All in favor of the amendment as offered? I will abstain. That was 5 in favor and 1 abstention. That's it.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Thank you.
not-
No, not at
I'm
all.
sorry not to have talked to you about that last.
No, she might not have the answer even then, so, thanks, Donald, that's good. Okay, next one, amendment to the municipal solid waste and variable pricing ordinance. I hope the discussion is shorter than the title.
Who's supposed to sign it? Tom?
We have a signature
Are we not
page
signing this
for
tonight,
the,
then?
for the document.
Yeah,
We are signing
yeah,
it.
because we voted, we proved
We'll
it.
see what the amendment,
Yeah.
if we can do
Okay.
the amendment
Okay,
or not.
Yeah.
all right.
Great, thank you.
Tell us about this amendment to the municipal solid
Yeah,
waste.
this is an easy one. Back when the original law was passed regarding recycling, one of the requirements of the legislation required that haulers and facilities shall report on the quantities of municipal solid waste, organics, and mandated recyclables collected in a given town for each quarter. As part of our work with the Alliance, of which we are a member, every municipality adopted this language that you see in quotes, so that every town was required to force its haulers and its facilities to report these quantities. The transfer station, operated by Casella, obviously reports based on a state mandated requirement for transfer stations. The other haulers in town, TAM, Casella, and one small hauler, the Sweets, have been reporting, the Sweets not so much as others, but on a quarterly basis. Well, the legislature finally apparently had an epiphany and decided that that was overbearing and nonsensical information to try to gather from each and every hauler. Bennington is fortunate, we only have 3 licensed haulers in the community. So the state has allowed now alliances such as ours or individual towns to delete this language. They still must get a license on an annual basis and they pay a fee for the license, but this reporting requirement is now deleted from the ordinance. Arlington and Shaftesbury have already held their hearings and deleted the information. I'm asking the board to approve this ordinance amendment, which would delete it for us as well.
That does sound easy.
Yeah. Motion
Motion to delete.
to amend by deleting, right?
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Oh, your question?
Just getting ahead of
Okay. You're way ahead. Keep it going. 6 in favor, no opposition. Town manager's reports.
Yes.
Before you get going, because I jumped and I came from another meeting and jumped right into the wrong agenda item. You shared with all of us today sort of an update on the Bowen Road property or project.
Yes.
And you gave it a very concise, clear statement. And unless there's some discussion on it, I think at some given point we're going to want to see a reconciliation of that budget work in context with the bond.
We will do that. We will certainly do that, especially as we near completion of the facility. We'll know exactly, I mean, we know right now exactly where we are,
Yeah.
but I wasn't able to gather that kind of detail.
I don't think, frankly, we would like to get it. And night's probably not a great night to have that discussion anyway. I'd rather see it, we've got the general context of what's going on and where you're at. I think when you get closer to the finish line, so we can have a real discussion to make sure that we stayed within the budget on time and otherwise. So that if you have questions,
I can sit here tonight and practically guarantee that we will stay well within the budget.
So if there's savings there, which is
Practically guarantee.
For transparency for the voters, when I read that email today, it was very helpful to get an update on the project. I don't know the policy, but can that information be shared? Is it not something that's?
Oh, it's now a matter of public record.
Okay, that's what I wasn't clear on. So that went in
Oh, sure.
I mean, I read it this afternoon. It wasn't in the packet then.
No,
so-
no, I put it together to, ask Larry to
Yeah.
put it together today.
I haven't read it yet either.
That's why I was asking the question, so it will be in. submitted into-
Yes, we'll
Oh, great.
distribute it.
That's
It'll
worth
be-
reading.
Make it part of the minutes.
In fact, I could do it as a column or something along those lines,
Yeah.
that we get it out to the entire community.
So for those curious, the information we're discussing right now is in relation to the town garage building, and there was a great update provided today by Larry McLeod on the status of that project. It's
Sounds fair.
very informative. I mean, I would take the time to read it.
Yep. There's a lot of stuff here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
great,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, thanks, Stu. You can get right to your report.
Okay. You probably noted at the end of your packet that we have the resignation from the Housing Authority of Scott Fox. He is a resident member of the Housing Authority, but we usually announce these vacancies. This will really be a vacancy that must be filled from within a Housing Authority property. It has to be someone who is a tenant. But I wanted to make that announcement and get that out there. Hopefully, the Housing Authority Board is already looking for a replacement.
Great.
That can be recommended to us.
Great.
The first action item I had came to light when we were trying to get our information out to the agencies who will be looking for funding this year. We are technically in the third year under our policy, which means that every agency that receives funding must petition. The unfortunate situation that has occurred is 2 years ago, a new agency was voted funding, so they're not in that third-year cycle. So we have everybody but one agency required to petition, and the thought was, in talking with the town clerk, to amend the policy so that all agencies petition every year. Agencies can now combine onto one petition, as long as they list the agency and the amount they seek. Secretary of State has ruled that's valid. All of our major funding agencies, Coalition for the Homeless, VNA Hospice, I think I'm losing it, BPI, some of the others that receive more than 7,500 already do that. They combine onto one petition and get sufficient signatures to be on the ballot on an annual basis. And they've been doing that now for at least three years. So the thought was, if all the smaller agencies, those agencies that request less than $7,500 from us, were to do the same, they could petition every year in that format. I had a brief conversation with Tom today about this particular question, and actually the easiest thing might be to do to amend the policy that if you are a successful agency and you have been voted the monies, which is $7,500 or less, that we remove the petitioning responsibility entirely going forward. So they're not required to go back on a 3-year basis to get those signatures. The original idea was it renews the community's enthusiasm for the particular agency and its funding, but frankly, these agencies pass 3.5, 4 to 1 every year. And is it really beneficial to have them go back to the well every 3 years? I can tell you it confuses the agencies perhaps as much as it confuses us to make sure that we stay on that cycle. And so perhaps what the board ought to do is amend the policy to eliminate that petitioning requirement for all agencies receiving less than $7,500 who have been continually successful.
Yeah, and they go on the ballot anyway, so I mean, it's not like they're...
Right, yeah, we put them on the ballot voluntarily.
Yeah.
And then what would happen with agencies
Above that.
requesting more than $7,500?
They would still have to petition.
Every 3 years or every?
No, every year.
I leave it to you, whether or not that
I mean,
it seems like
those amounts are substantially more than the 7,500 in many cases.
It's
And,
almost drastically.
But I think it's also, so the agencies that are requesting more than 7,500 are also the agencies that are having pretty significant impact across our community. And it takes away from their ability to do work to have to do the petitions. And frankly, every 3 years, it means they have to go out and get 500, what is it?
469, something along those lines.
469 signatures. That's a big effort. And to make it yearly, I think, again, I think that's putting an undue burden on the very groups that we depend on to do work that our municipality has trouble doing itself. Without all these organizations out there assisting us, we would have to step up and do those things ourselves. And they're doing a great benefit to us.
What's the downside of just staying with the 3 years, other than that one agency that's out of sync?
Well, the downside is that agency would not be required to petition this year, but be required to petition on its own next year.
To get into
So it's a downside for the agency more than a downside for us.
Is this the kind of decision that we should be not doing in other business, but we should do in kind of a warned open session, or is this?
I don't know if this is really a protocol, I think.
Well, it's a policy that was adopted by a former board.
Okay.
I mean, we don't need action tonight. Petitions really aren't due until sometime in January.
Right.
We like to have those applications that are those who do not petition. We like to have those applications come in earlier so we understand what the impact on the overall bottom line is. And then we wait for the petition agencies to get to us on the appropriate timeline. And it's
We can't take any
mid-January. We have
action
time
on this
if we want to
anyway.
think about it.
I feel like I need to think about it.
Yeah.
So just to play devil's advocate, if you had an agency that started to really do bad work and, the voters didn't feel good about it, I guess that it would be, I could see why it might be important to have that signature bar come up. Maybe it's not every 3 years, maybe it's every 5 years or something. I could imagine how having to do that once in a while might be handy. And I guess the other side, Jeannie, is, on the bigger requests, we want to be a generous community. We need to support these services that are so important to us. But what's the downward pressure? Sort of what keeps it from just ratcheting up more and more on the taxpayers? And I think this has been a sort of a subtle downward pressure, which is to require a certain amount of effort into signatures on a somewhat regular basis. I'm not sure if I've got that right or not. But.
Yeah, so I mean, I think a 3-year cycle makes sense. I do think that 3 years gives you time to evaluate how well an organization is doing their work. I think every year it's hard to evaluate year to year. So I'm not opposed to having some kind of requirement for the level 2 fundings above 7,500. But I think a yearly requirement to go out and petition, I think you're turning around and doing petitions all the time. I mean, it takes, to get 500 signatures, it takes a bit of time. So if we didn't act on this for a month and we gave an organization a month to get the signatures, that means a bunch of staff people are going to be out there every day collecting signatures rather than doing the work they're supposed to do. So, I guess I would love to eliminate the requirement for the smaller requests, but I would be concerned about a yearly requirement to do a petition drive for larger organizations. I do think that in the interim years, I would love to be getting a formal written report that says, here's what we've done, here's what our budget looks like, here's how we've used the money, so that there's some accountability. And then I think it's our opportunity to invite them to come in and talk if that makes sense. So I do think there should be accountability here. I just
Agreed. And I think the policy should reflect that too, and that's what I think why we have to have an agenda item for the policy, incorporating all of those things.
I mean, Jeannie makes a good point. I mean, one of the, when they are required to petition every year, we don't seek any information from them as to what they're doing or how they're doing, because the petition gets them onto the ballot. So if you were to take your example and go on a 3-year basis, at least in those successive years, once they are successful, they would be reporting to us in order to get on the ballot voluntarily from the perspective.
Let's come up with a
We'll do
policy recommendation from management that will be part of an agenda, so it'll be warned and the agencies can come in and share their thoughts.
We'll try to get that to you on the next agenda if we can.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Really, there's not much else, as we are all probably painfully aware. Construction on the PFOA water lines has begun. We found some roads closed we didn't anticipate being closed. Bus routes were altered. All of those kinds of things, but I think we've got that smoothed out. No road should be closed entirely. These are water main extensions. They can be done without road closures. The only time you might close the road is when you're making a crossing. But I think we've got those things worked out. These folks are working, and many of them are hopeful that at least the majority of their water line extension will be finished before snow flies. We'll still have cross connections to the homes and those kinds of installations that may have to wait to next year. And just to follow up on that, RJ and I had a discussion today. What we're requiring on the road patching is basically you patch where you dig. Most of those roads that they're working on were actually scheduled for paving this year, and we postponed it. But RJ believes that if they do their work and just patch the one side where they're digging, we will be able to come back in a future year. It may not be next year, it may be the year after, depending on how the projects go. And we'd be able to do a quick overlay and probably do more miles for less money than we would have in the beginning.
That's great.
So
you're
we're already
tired.
planning to how we might take advantage of this project.
You've been fielding a call or two from the neighborhood.
I did have a couple of calls on that first day.
Okay.
Where buses were turned back to the schools and parents were called to come and get their children.
But it's going pretty
It really only, as far as I know, it only happened with one school, but it was a concerned parent. So that's all I have.
Thanks. Other business?
I just want to compliment probably Dan on the incredible day when the TIF BEPSI board was here. It was really great, and Stephanie reiterated again to me and probably other people how impressed she is with the work and how everyone is just so cooperative and prepared, and the process has just gone so well. So kudos to anyone who had anything to do with that day. It was a great day.
Nothing this week.
All set.
I have one thing. I just wanted to share that CCV is doing a donation drive for the Vermont Veterans Home, and this is actually CCV all over the state. And they are collecting items such as CDs of any type of music, envelopes, stamps, writing paper, men's caps, belts, suspenders, and puzzles, like 300, 500 word easy grip puzzles. But anything for donation. And if you're in Bennington area, you can come by CCV in Bennington and drop off donated items. We've already had some businesses who have donated. I just want to say Cray Printing actually did the flyers and then donated to the Veterans Home, which is lovely. So we're taking donations until through November 10th. So please feel free to drop anything off. And thank you.
Good time to phone out. Again, for the board, thanks to management, Dan et al. It was really an excellent day. You served your position well and the community well in that presentation. Also, the community individuals that appeared, not just the leaders, but folks that are concerned and hoping to see the benefit of the TIF application and approval. I sort of heard a couple of comments from the Pepsi members as they were leaving, talking to each other. They said that was probably one of the best presentations they've ever been involved with. And that means that preparation preceded that. So again, thanks Dan and Mike as well. Make sure you get that word out. Thanks. We need a special executive session for a contract matter. It's a matter that cannot be dealt with in open public session. So I do need a
move we go into executive session on the contract matter.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, signify by aye. Aye. Well, there are 6 of us that are ready to sit.